What is an organization behavior scientist?
There are not too many people who would take this title. If you do an MBA, एक subject होता है called organizational behavior. In that subject, it's all about how people behave in organization, what motivates them, a little bit about team dynamics, how do people interact with each other, all of that.
Right.
So that is organizational behavior. World Economic Forum had published some data 3-4 years ago where they'd shown that in 5 years, the half life of a skill had become half or 40% of what it was across 5 years. So we know कि आपने जो आज सीखा है वो बहुत हमेशा के लिए तो है नहीं. वो पहले अगर 3 साल के लिए था तो अभी 1 साल के लिए है. So the biggest skill is this learning to learn. Right at the start, you will be taking some calls, right? Which product or which service will you launch? What kind of organization do you want to be in the external world? Who do you want to work with? And where should my office be, right? There's so many choices, right? And before you know it, you are making cultural choices through operational decision. What appears to you to be a very operational decision, iska culture se kya lena dena, but you are actually starting to seed the culture there and then. And think about it, like all these mega organizations like Apple, where the founder was so larger than life, his personality was
heroic.
Yeah, and it was like a personality, right? It wasn't a quiet thing, right? Some years ago, I was teaching an MBA program. So I had written an article on why is Gen Z so stressed. So I'd asked people that you have opportunities we never ever could even think of. So why are you so stressed? And nikal ke aaya that the points of reference are completely different. No matter how well they are doing, people feel they should be doing more. Because now who are they comparing themselves to? They're comparing themselves to 20-something global billionaires.
Hi, hello and welcome to Talking Through. I'm Dipankar. Today we have an organization behavior scientist with us, Dr. Shalini Lal. And I'm not going to say much because this is a topic I don't know that much. So welcome, Dr. Shalini.
Hi, Dipankar. So delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here because I think we've always wanted to invite somebody like you for the podcast. And thankfully, you have come here. So we are going to try and make the most of it.
Oh, my honor, my pleasure.
I'm not going to introduce you much, but I want you to do it. So please tell everybody about your experience, about your stories, and also what is an organization behavior scientist?
I know. There are not too many people who would take this title. So I think if I had heard it the first time, I would be wondering, "Ye hota kya hai? Like, what is this thing?" So, if you do an MBA, and I did an MBA, एक subject होता है called organizational behavior. And in that subject, it's all about how people behave in organizations, what motivates them, a little bit about team dynamics, how do people interact with each other. Then the organizational, things like culture. हम लोग organizational culture की बात तो कितनी बार करते हैं,
Right.
So what is culture? What is effectiveness within an organization, adaptation, agility, all of that.
Right.
So that is organizational behavior. It's a little different from HR because HR is all about processes. Usme, like what's your recruitment process, your training process, appraisal process, that's managed by HR. But OB is the softer part.
Right.
It's like when you join an organization and you say, okay, that organization is a really good organization, you enjoy working there. That means that the environment is well suited to who you are.
Right.
The person who studies this interaction between the environment and the individual is someone like me, an organizational behavior scientist. So that is the work that I do. In my own career journey, I started my career about 3 decades ago. I have played multiple roles. So I have been within organizations in HR roles. I've also been an academic because, one of the things I really, really was hungry for was the kind of intellectual rigor I thought a PhD would give me. So I've spent time in academia. Even today, I'm associated with many institutes in some format or the other because I think there's a discipline that comes in only through a PhD and only through academia that, you really cannot get anywhere else. But of course, the place I really like to work in is real world organizations, actual people, actual organizations. So I try and combine both academics and actual organizational work.
Right.
So that's a little bit about my story. I will say that it's not a popular choice. So when I did my MBA, I was the only person in a batch of 220 who had decided that organizational behavior would be my specialty. So yeah.
But why? Why?
Why? Actually, what happened was I joined my MBA very young. I turned 20 like 3 weeks before I joined my MBA program. I went to IIM Ahmedabad. And there was no real reason why I was there except कि admission मिल गई. Admission मिल गई और आपको एक बार मिल जाए तो you have to go pretty much, you know.
Exactly.
So I was there, but there was nothing really that excited me about the finance subjects or the accounts or even, to be honest, marketing, operations. I didn't really enjoy them. They felt a little cold to me. But then we did a course. In that course, a bunch of us went to a beach town and just talked about our lives. So जैसे कि चार पांच के ग्रुप्स में हम बैठ के बस अपनी लाइफ के बारे में बात कर रहे थे और एक फैसिलिटेटर था हर ग्रुप के साथ. एंड व्हाट वी डिस्कवर्ड वाज 5 दिन अगर हम सिर्फ अपनी लाइफ के बारे में बात करें, हमारी एक्चुअली इट्स ऑलमोस्ट लाइक जिंदगी का नजरिया बदल जाता है. So for me, that was like such an aha moment, and I felt, oh my God, if something can be so powerful in 5 days, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. So there was no job in this area. I didn't even take placement with my batch, in fact. Okay. I didn't take placement. I think everyone thought I'm really crazy because tab tha, if you go to IIM Ahmedabad and don't take placement, to aap gaye kyun? Gaye kyun? You know? But this turned out to be really the joy of my life. So,
right. Great. I'm a little intrigued, and I want to ask you about how much is psychology involved in this?
A lot.
And how?
So organizational behavior is actually an applied science.
Okay.
Usme you have psychology, sociology, actually also social psychology, you have anthropology, you have complexity sciences. So there are many influences that help us understand why people interact with organizations the way they do.
Right.
So अलग-अलग questions के लिए आप अलग-अलग disciplines में आप जाएंगे. So if you want to know like what motivates me as a person, individual, so you'll go into psychology. If you want to know how you and I will interact, we'll have to go into social psychology.
Right.
If we want to look at organizations as systems, we'll look at sociology. We might look at anthropology. If we want to look at an industry level, what's happening, we might look at complexity sciences. So अलग-अलग questions के लिए आप अलग-अलग disciplines में you sort of dip into and understand.
Okay. I will ask you more questions on this, but I think I should move forward and ask you about future readiness that you have so much written about and you have spoken about it. So I just want to understand the concept and why is it relevant?
So I first got involved in this question actually when India was going through liberalization. So because I started my career in the early 90s, late, and liberalization policies early 90s में ही आई थी.
91.
So late 90s, actually second half of the 90s, was a period of immense change within Indian organizations. Frankly, that was a time when either you transformed or you vanished. And if you were to look at early 90s, what were the big names in Indian business and who were the big names 10 years later, the list is totally different. कुछ लोग हैं common, obviously, but बहुत लोग vanished. So it was a time of great transformation. And I was working with an organization which was doing a lot of consulting work on this. And I was leading many of those projects. And I didn't know what it meant to develop, this whole future readiness in organizations. I had no idea. So I went to every business school in India and I spoke to academics who knew something about it and realized किसी को कुछ पता ही नहीं है because ये पहले हुआ ही नहीं था. India में उससे पहले there was no such, nothing had happened. We were just moving slowly. So my PhD then looked at the 2008 financial crisis and looked at, if I were to study 4 organizations, which I did over an 18-month period, and see what enables some organizations to really adapt to an environmental shock, because that's what it was, right? It was an environmental shock. What within the organizational culture, leadership practices, design of the organization allowed some organizations to bounce back really quickly, and what made it really hard for them. So that's really how my interest began. So my interest is actually 20 years old.
Yeah.
But once the whole idea of fourth industrial revolution started, and I think 2013 is when, the World Economic Forum spoke about it, then I realized our organizations are completely not designed for that level of change. And from 2017 onwards, that's been my area of focus. So,
Great.
yeah.
I want to understand from you about organization behavior, how it functions in a new company versus a slightly older company.
Ooh,
right?
Okay.
Because we are in an age and era where startups come and go, and the older businesses are also there. So, what is the difference? Like, how does it operate in the real world?
I think one of the most, for me at least, it was a big aha moment was when I realized that even if you are in day one of your company, you are actually making decisions about the company culture, even if you're the only person in the organization. Because right at the start, you will be taking some calls, right? Which product or which service will you launch? What kind of organization do you want to be in the external world? Who do you want to work with? Should I work with Dipankar? Should I work with somebody else? And where should my office be, right? Should it be here? Should it be in Pune? Should it be in Bombay, Bangalore, whatever? There's so many choices, right? Will I work as a solo person? Will I work as in a hybrid kind of environment? And before you know it, you are making cultural choices through operational decisions. What appears to you to be a very operational decision, iska culture se kya lena dena, but you are actually starting to seed the culture there and then. How do you interact with people? Like you have been so gracious in the way you invited me here. So that seeded the culture of talking through, whether you do it consciously or not. And it happens in like hundreds of invisible decisions. So it's a bit like parenting. Once you have a kid, you may choose to do nothing, but you are still parenting. Because even the choice of doing nothing is a choice. It's a choice. And it will influence everything that is to follow. So you can never not build a culture. It's just, are you doing it consciously or is it just happening? Just happening.
Just happening.
Just happening, right?
Subconsciously,
right? Ho raha hai. So it's inevitable. The moment you make operational decisions, हर ऑपरेशनल डिसीजन में कोई ना कोई कल्चरल एलिमेंट छुपा होगा जो बाद में पता चलेगा इसका ये इम्पैक्ट था. सो जो it's a bit like seeding the DNA of an organization. And as a startup, you're creating that. It's fluid. They're making so many new decisions, so many choices that will impact the organization in profound ways. In larger organizations, over time, वो भूल जाता है. And I'll give you an example. About 20 odd years ago, I had gone to Goa to do a program for management trainees for a very well-known organization, DuPont. Aapne shayad naam suna hoga. And one of the things I found so interesting, because we were doing this program in a hotel, and obviously we had young people in Goa, they want to go out, they want to have fun in the evening, quite naturally. And what would be the most natural choice in Goa? Two-wheeler, right? Two-wheeler hire karo or jao, most natural. But what I learned was that in DuPont's policy, at least at the time, early 2000s, they could not take a two-wheeler.
Oh.
They could not take a two-wheeler, right? And if you don't know anything about DuPont, you would wonder, what? Why? This doesn't make sense.
Right.
But if you look into the history of an organization like DuPont, one of their biggest early products was dynamite.
Oh, okay.
Now, if you're in the business of dynamite, what is it that you have to prioritize above anything else?
Safety.
Safety, correct? So everything will be viewed from the lens of safety. And safety first, safety first, safety first, safety first. So you will automatically have seeded an organizational culture for whom safety is not something that comes later, it is first and foremost. And therefore, things like we will travel by a car with seat belts in the rear, which imagine in the early 2000s was still fairly,
new.
It was really hard to find. But that's an example. So as you become a larger organization and, it's been several decades, in fact, like DuPont, it's been 150 years or something, you would need to learn about this. Okay, this is the history of the organization, and that's why we have these interesting cultural artifacts कि भी हम two wheeler नहीं ले सकते
ये हमारे culture के बाहर है
culture के बाहर है so that's the difference essentially
yeah.
वहाँ invisible हो गया यहाँ पे आप बना रहे हो वहाँ पे अब वो बन चुका है और आप उसमें you are trying to live by those rules which you may not even know why they came about.
Right. With this question, just a follow-up question.
Yeah.
That is, when a company is founded,
yeah,
there are founders/founders.
Yeah.
And their personality is imprinted on the company.
Right?
And if the company is successful, it lives a long life.
Yeah.
And the founders are gone.
Yeah.
And then the transformation starts to happen in the culture.
Yeah.
So how does that happen, both positively and negatively?
So, one of the interesting ideas, and this is like a research fact in the science of OB, is what's called the founder's blueprint. जो कि बिल्कुल जैसे आपने बोला कि आप the founders' personalities and the business, जैसे DuPont का example था. Many early decisions, operational decisions at that time have now created the DNA for that organization. So this research shows that if you try and change the DNA of an organization too much, it'll die. Because it's the invisible fabric that is tying so many things together, which you don't know. You may think ये अलग decision है, ये अलग decision है, operationally. लेकिन there's a certain fabric, the DNA, which is consistent. It may have been rooted 150 years ago, but there is a certain consistent DNA. So the challenge then becomes that when you come in as a CEO, say 40 years later, 50 years later, 100 years later, when the original, founders may be long gone, you may never meet them, you may not even know the history of the organization. As a leader, you have to be very conscious. If you disrupt something very fundamental to the culture, organizational mortality is high. This is statistically proven. You cannot that's the facts, right? Evidence-based management. So, but change to aapko karna hai. Because obviously what was helpful in the 1850s will be different from what will be helpful today. But you have to do it with that understanding that what is so core to the success of, say, this organization that I must not tamper. And think about it, like all these mega organizations, like Apple, where the founder was so larger than life, his personality was
heroic.
Yeah, and it was like a personality, right? It wasn't a quiet thing, right? And then if your successor doesn't understand what's the fabric that has come from that person and what should you change, what should you not change, what should you change carefully, the organization dies. So you have to be really careful about that.
Right. My question is more about something very fundamental that I've heard many times, that a decision happens and the employees start feeling, oh, this is not our culture. They forget whether the decision is right or wrong. It has happened to me. Instead of thinking whether this is a business decision or not, our instinct is to say, ye hamara culture nahi hai. So how does a management team, a leadership team manage that?
It's a really good question because cultures must evolve. Cultures must evolve. And business decisions will impact culture. There is no question about it. Culture कोई vacuum में नहीं बन रहा होता. In fact, the last place where culture is made is in culture decks. वो तो
वहाँ तो बनता नहीं है.
वहाँ तो बनता नहीं है. It's in the daily operational decision making that your culture is actually formed, right? The task for senior leadership is respecting that and talking about it and talking and understanding what this, if they're making a sharp departure from the way things are done in past, you have to carry people along. And that's a leadership job. It's not a management job. It's a leadership job because what you are now doing is you are, from your own personal credibility space, you're telling people, I know this is not how things have been. Trust me, there's a really good reason. This is the good reason. This is what we're going to do. Tell me if things are working or not working. It matters. And you have to play the leadership role to actually make those changes.
Right.
Otherwise, it's very hard for that to even stick. And when it sticks, you lose people. So you have to take people along, and that's a leadership process
to do. Yeah. And you must be interacting with so many organizations, leaders, people who work in those companies. Have you felt sometimes, oh, there is such a big disconnect between these two things? And
yeah, see, the thing is that entrepreneurs have different skills, right? An entrepreneur skill is the ability to spot an opportunity and go for it and make things happen and build a business, right? Some of them temperamentally are also very conscious of what organization am I building, but that's not the majority.
Yeah.
The majority are building a business first, and the organization is an afterthought, or basically a mechanism to be, ये अचीव करना है तो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन बना लो, 5 लोग यहाँ हायर कर लो, 10 लोग वहाँ हायर कर लो, और ये रूल्स बना दो, राइट? So it really depends on their level of consciousness, actually, of what is it that they are building. Yeah.
So it's a conscious decision.
It is.
Of what kind of culture they will build inside their organizations. Another leading question is, there are a lot of companies which has a culture ingrained in them, and then they start to expand in other countries.
Right.
And then there is a local culture.
Yeah.
And there is an inherent parent company culture.
Yeah.
And sometimes they can come in opposite directions, right?
Yeah.
Face to face rather than along with each other.
Yeah.
So what is your observation in these cases, and how are these things managed?
So here are ways to do it well and ways to not do it well. I would say if you're just not conscious of this idea also, and you just think, okay, वहाँ अभी मुझे कोरिया में business करना है, मैं जो मुझे यहाँ आता है इंडिया में वो बोलता हूँ कि कोरिया में ऐसे करो या चाइना में ऐसे करो. I don't know how many examples we have of that, but if that's a very not the best judgment. Let me just put it like that. Right. That's not the best judgment. The real question is, for my organization, what do I want to hold core? कि no matter हम अंटार्कटिका में भी कर रहे होंगे तो ये 2-4 चीजें हम ऐसे ही करेंगे. No matter where. Yeah. And be open to changing everything else. Be open to that. And then arrive at something that allows for the country culture to find a voice. And of course, what really matters to you to be the heart of it, and both are important. There is absolutely no way, even in the most, like I'll tell you, about 20 years ago, I had read this research paper which blew my mind, which was about pilot practices. Now, आप सोचो तो pilot का role कितना technical होता है, and it's sort of universal, right? Whether you're flying out from Korea or I'm flying out from Delhi or someone else from Japan, it's going to be the same protocol, right? Yeah. What are you going to do, etc.
Yeah, flight manual.
Yeah, it's by manual. It's not मेरी मर्जी में मैं ये right? Yeah. But even in an industry like this, which is so regulated, so safety first, so technical, the training is almost universal. This study found that actual pilot operations differ depending on the country they had come from. So there is you can't really eliminate it, but you have to understand it. Right. कि अगर ये इंडिया में करेंगे तो this is the way to make this successful. And if you look at Indian MNCs, I mean, global organizations which have done really, really well in India, obviously the biggest example is Levers. They understand what will bring out the best here, while holding, of course, their global principles, etc., core. But they understand what will really bring out the best here. And it's that understanding and that wisdom that allows you to really prosper versus other organizations which just haven't thought about it enough, haven't reflected.
Yeah.
सोचा ही नहीं.
Again, a conscious decision has to happen. When you meet the leadership teams or leaders of different companies, like what are some of the blind spots they commonly have?
Well, I'll speak more in the future readiness context now because that's what I've been focused on for the last few years. Um, See, the challenge, and it's a real challenge, when I really, 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 really empathize with, is a lot of leaders are, say, have grown up in worlds that were very different. So, particularly if you've had a long career, 32 years, or 20 plus years, what you have learned in the early years of your professional journey obviously has made you super successful. You are there as CXO because you were really, really good at something. But what's happened is that the world has changed so dramatically that, I know it's a cliche, what brought you here won't get you there, but it is really true. Because the pace of change impacts everything, everything. So just to give you an example, like in the past, industry में change हो रहा है. Let's take liberalization wala change because I was, I'd worked with many organizations going through the transformation at that time. You had years. And the larger organizations, they have spent like 5 years, 7 years to do an organizational transformation. It's really that long. And कोई ऐसा मतलब आप बिल्कुल सोच समझ के हर चीज बिल्कुल केयरफुली कर सकते हो और करना चाहिए भी there's a lot of merit to that. The world is not collapsing, your business is not collapsing, you can have that time. But what's happening today is that 5-7 years is a lifetime. Entire like business industry parameters completely are can shift. So the luxury of time is not there in the same way, just not there in the same way. You have to be far more alert to where is the world headed in this new world, where the next set of opportunities will come from, what does it mean for my current line of business, how do I enable this movement towards the next set of emerging opportunities. And any organization which has sort of neglected this, before they know it, they are running a stable operation, but 5 साल बाद पता चला नहीं आपका market share तो अब वो 5% बच गया बस. And we're just seeing this industry after industry after industry. It's just so interesting, that's the thing that's shifted a lot. Earlier, you didn't need to necessarily figure it out on your own. If you had the money, board approved it, you would call a big name consulting firm. You would say, tell us where we should go. And the consulting firm, with all their wisdom from the globe, would say, here is where you need to go. And then you would, move ahead on that. But today, you can do that once in a while. But that cannot be the way of operating. There's change every single day.
Right. So the acceleration of evolution is so rapid that you just have to keep evolving all the time, right? And with this, I have this question in mind, which I don't know might be popular or unpopular, but now the Gen Z workforce, I don't know how they were tagged like that, but Gen Z workforce is now entered and their aspirations, ambitions, they want to work is slightly different or maybe a lot different on how we started, right? Now, organization behavior will have to adapt. So how does that happen in a positive way without cribbing about things what people have been cribbing about?
Yeah, that's such a good question. See, organizations which are hiring a lot of Gen Z, and that's a lot of organizations, particularly in India. I think in India, you cannot run an organization without it being 50%,
Gen Z population.
Yeah. Like when I was saying, understanding change and knowing what to hold core and what to let go, that's still at the heart of it. Because you cannot do without them. You cannot do without them. And you are right. We had done some research 2-3 years ago about how Gen Z has changed. What we found was there's an big city versus small city divide still. And in big cities, if we talk about people who who come from very stable economic backgrounds in particular. And I think being in big cities, just the aspirations are very very different. The opportunity, like क्या opportunities available है, बहुत ज़्यादा अलग है.
इकोसिस्टम ही अलग है.
बिल्कुल इकोसिस्टम अलग है ना. तो इवन इन नॉट सो वेल ऑफ फैमिलीज यू विल फाइंड वो एक्सपेक्टेशंस बहुत बदल गई हैं, बहुत बदल गई हैं. जो लोग इवन आई व्हेन आई वाज स्टार्टिंग माय करियर, हम बिल्कुल ये समझते तो नॉर्मल चीज़ है, इसमें क्या है, वो आजकल लोग नॉर्मल भी नहीं समझते हैं और उसको दे डोंट एक्सेप्ट. वो चेंज तो हमें लाना ही पड़ेगा, लाना ही पड़ेगा. देयर इज नो क्वेश्चन अबाउट इट. थिंग्स लाइक being more conscious of the ethical lens with which we are being viewed, being more conscious of the fact that Gen Z values their personal space and time a lot more. Gen Z's aspirations seem to be personal excellence and maybe becoming whatever multi-millionaires through some startup. It's not necessary that I'm going to spend 20 years in this company working step by step. They want they can see people around them who do really well. So the aspiration is bigger than what you can probably give in most organizations. So you have to understand how the world is different. There's no question about it. It's really hard. It's really hard. And when I was speaking a little while earlier about how the acceleration of change, obviously the most obvious is tech, but tech is not the only one. Although tech enabled because of social media, internet, whatever, who am I comparing myself to has changed so much. So I'll tell you this story. Some years ago, I was teaching an MBA program. I've written an article on why is Gen Z so stressed, because in the US, the Surgeon General, they had just announced that mental health crisis hai Gen Z. So I'd asked people that you have opportunities we never ever could even think of. So why are you so stressed? And nikal ke aaya that the points of reference are completely different. No matter what, this is like a premier business school, okay? No matter how well they are doing, people feel they should be doing more. Because now who are they comparing themselves to? Like, who was I comparing myself to in my 20s? Can I afford pehle a two-wheeler? Then can I finally have a car? Can I pay the rent? If I could do this, I was super successful. There was like, bas ho gaya, ab kya? This is it. But what are they comparing themselves to? They're comparing themselves to 20-something global billionaires. So that's in our generation, there was no such thing. You came from a wealthy family, that's a different story. But you didn't just become, 20-something billionaire. It was not possible. So if you're super smart today in India, and even if you're not super smart, the point of reference are so different, different. We have to appreciate that. This is the world.
Yeah. I mean, when I started working, I think it was the same for me as well. Roti, kapda, makan was not enough. Right? We needed a car or other luxuries that were required, which probably the earlier generation did not require. The context had changed. The second thing is that doesn't matter if you don't have Gen Zs in your company, but they will end up being your customers. So if you don't understand them, then how do you design your product? So I think because there's so much chatter about, Gen Z workforce. So I just wanted to know your, opinion on that.
I think it's a different world, and I think we have to work with this world.
Yeah, we just have to.
We just have to.
Yeah. I also read about your Future Mind series on LinkedIn. So I just want you to elaborate on that a little bit more for our audience.
So, one of the things I had realized, I'll tell you how the idea came. We were doing some consulting work for a very excellent conglomerate, Indian conglomerate. And one of the things I realized was when you are looking at, say, senior leaders and who will be a good business leader for tomorrow, right? Your CXO succession plan. It's not enough to introduce them to topics like design thinking, innovation, AI, whatever, jo bhi traditional, those are the topics today which are like most popular. That's good. It's very important. But where the real work needs to happen is the psychology of future readiness. Because psychology of future readiness mein bahut cheezein aati hain. First is starting point. Am I interested in the future or not? And there are, I mean, for very good reasons, I could feel this world is not headed in the right direction. I don't know how active a role I want to play in this future. And that's a perfectly legitimate choice. But at least I need to own it up, whichever way. I might find the future frightening, not consciously, but even subconsciously, because it's going to expose the fact that I don't necessarily have the skills for this world. I may see my kids do whatever so quickly and struggle with doing the same thing myself. And it, evokes this fear that maybe I don't necessarily have all that it takes, which, some 32-year-old in this startup is able to do. Will I be able to do or not, right? So there are these very real fears, capability fears. There is anxiety about the future. So that's one part of it. What in our framework we call the shadow forces, the things that are, without us knowing necessarily, this is operating at a subconscious level, but it's pulling us back from fully engaging with the future. One more is our desire for conformity. Like we want to.
It's basically confirmation bias.
जो आप कहते हो हम करते हैं, सब लोग तो ये कर रहे हैं, I don't want to be so different, when you're so different and you stand out and you attract attention and there's controversy, I don't want all of that. I want to just do what others are doing. But today that's not an option really. So let's say there are these forces, psychological forces that can pull us back into the present and not allow us to fully engage with the future. Then there is, what's my personal capacity for dealing with so much uncertainty? Let's not kid ourselves. Dealing with so much change and uncertainty is not fun all the time. I mean, some things are fun and some things are continuously you have to learn again. अभी तो 6 महीने पहले सीखा था, अब कुछ और आ गया. And of course in the AI world, you're seeing this all the time. Because of AI models, upping their game every few months. It should impact the process, So that kind of rapid change humans don't enjoy, because you're never settled, Just when something became automatic, now it's no longer automatic. So what's my personal orientation towards this ambiguity, this uncertainty, this continuous demand for growth, change? And not everybody is equally comfortable with it. In fact, we vary a lot on this. There are many people who like more stable roles. I'll be really good at this, but don't ask me to change every 3 months. Let me be more steady state. And there are people who thrive in that also. So it's about, let's be aware of who we are. What's our natural style? Maybe I thrive in this much change and this much is too much and this much is too little. And the point is very different for you, So let's understand that. What's my personal? And then is मेरी interest क्या है world में? Am I even seeing? Am I seeing what's happening? Or am I just focused on मेरा ये job है, उसमें मुझे ये 10 चीज़ें करनी है, मेरे quarterly review के लिए मुझे ये करना है. But the future is not coming, in a announced way. It comes through very weak signals. कि अभी आपने सुना वहाँ मार्केट में ये चल रहा है, किसी ने ये 5 बातें बोली हैं, आपने सुना जेनजी वालों को अलग ये चाहिए. तो it comes in these whispers. If I'm not interested or curious enough, I will not register that. So that's
or completely ignore or reject it.
Completely ignore. Yeah. And then the final piece in this is, what is my capacity for innovation and creativity? Because being future ready now is about dealing with problems where there is no precedent. You can't look at पहले किसने किया, अरे वो क्या relevant है, अब तो सब बदल गया, सब बदल गया, आप कैसे करना चाहते हो, अब सोचो ना. Right. So what's my comfort with that? So that's broadly what it is.
Yeah. And you've also written about something called weak signals, right? So like how do we miss these signals when they are weak or very feeble? Right? How do we miss them and what really happens after that?
Yeah, and this is so interesting to me because this is where, so the weak signal concept comes from the strategy literature. And it points to a very fundamental strategy finding that tomorrow's future already exists somewhere. It may not be in the biggest companies, maybe on the fringes, maybe in a smaller way in some country, somewhere, whatever. So it's not like if we are listening to the weak signals, the future won't really catch us by surprise. Because whatever is going to happen in my home tomorrow is already happening somewhere. So the need for understanding weak signals, and weak signals could be technology, they could be geopolitics, they could be employee experience, could be client industry, client expectation, could be industry configurations, very sare weak signals at any given time. But the human evolution is designed to ignore weak signals. Humans have been around for 300,000 years. And who are the humans who have survived from an evolutionary perspective? Those who look at the danger at hand, who fight that, whatever, शेर आ गया आप भाग गए, right? वो आप नहीं ignore कर सकते, वो आपके सामने है, your instinct will make you run. It's not designed, the humans, through our evolutionary history, we are not designed to respond to weak signals because there are so many. The cognitive overload of that is tremendous. So that's frankly the reason why we miss weak signals, because it takes effort. It takes conscious, okay, I've heard this. It may not come tomorrow, but this is a signal I may want to track and see, how is this developing? Is this something that can be a reality for me tomorrow?
Right.
So that's what we need to do.
You also were mentioning one of your writings. You've also mentioned about our tendency to oversimplify, right? And that actually is increasing the complexity instead of simplifying it. Right? So it's a very interesting concept. Can you explain us a little bit more?
So in the last few years, I think one thing everyone has heard so many times is be a better storyteller. It's all about storytelling, what story you tell. And the reason is that the reason why stories have worked so well for humans is they decrease cognitive load. You will remember a story forever. Data tables will be
just vanish out
in 2 minutes. So we respond very differently, right? Stories in every culture are whatever, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bible ki stories, jo bhi. They stay with people forever. Forever. जो आपने सुना है वो आपके दिमाग में बैठ जाता है. And to the extent that that story is a good representation of reality, it is super helpful. Because our brains are finite in their capacity to, process essentially. The problem, and just notice the fact that the storytelling as a concept has become popular only now in the last 10 years. Before this, people would say, story, kahaniyan bana raha hai. Acha.
Time pass kar raha hai.
Time pass kar raha hai. Or they would say, ye to bahut English bolta hai. They would say it was disparaging, right? It was not serious work, right? Why has it become so popular? Because the world is so complex that for most of us, it's too much effort to try and understand everything. And a good story is made by good editing. So let's take, one example I really like personally is, aapne dekhi ek movie Blindside? Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock, yeah.
Really nice story, right? And I know that the first time I saw it, I was like, I want to be like this person who Sandra Bullock represents. What a beautiful thing she does. She takes home this homeless
and turns him into an athlete.
And this black teenager, she gives him opportunities that he would have never ever in his lifetime had, right? Great story. It's based on a real incident. Now, the real world is never so simple. The story part we like and I love. But the real world is way more complex. In actual fact, the boy whom she brings home, and she doesn't formally adopt, but she gives him a home and he becomes an athlete, etc., etc. He later does a case on the family and feels he was unfairly compensated for the earnings from the movie. And many other things also. Obviously, it's much, much more complex than that. And they go into litigation for years. That's reality. That something happened and something else also happened. When you create a good story, like any good story writer or editor or director, your ability to tell a good story depends on editing. Great editing. Ye nikalo. It's not moving the story forward. ये निकालो, it's not moving the story forward. But what you've done in the process, आपने reality को तो बहुत oversimplify कर दिया. This is not reality. ये एक reality का हिस्सा है. लेकिन और भी बहुत इसमें कहानियाँ निकल सकती हैं जो हमने इग्नोर कर दी. So the danger is जितना complexity हमारे environment में बढ़ता जाता है, we like simple stories, and you will see it in politics, by the way. There are examples in country after country after country. A leader comes in who gives a very simple explanation to a changing world that allows people to say, okay, अब समझ आ गया, अब he will take care. उसको पता चल गया, ये problem है. But because the reality is infinitely more complex than what is in that story, obviously it's going to fail. But we love it.
Right.
That's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to your response, and obviously more questions come to mind, but let me move forward a little bit. Another challenge I think you had called out earlier is, difficulty with exponentials, right? And why is so much change happening? And it is happening at an exponential level. It's not like step by step change. It's like whoosh, gone, right? So how is the real world managing with it? Because you've been interacting with leaders or the people in the organization. What is the mindset there?
I think it's not natural. It's a learned skill. And there's so many super smart leaders who have learned this skill, but it's not natural. And because if you look at nature, things don't happen exponentially too often. Mostly we're growing in steady state. Okay, आज इतना हमने agriculture किया, फिर चलो 5% और कर लेंगे, फिर चलो 5% और कर लेंगे, like that. Exponential change, क्योंकि exponential change is very strongly being driven by exponential technologies in the last 20 years and from here on, have created an environment that as humans, I know many people say this is only our fourth industrial revolution, first, second, third bhi to hua tha. Yeah, there are times of immense disruption. And at that time, things are not going to move linearly at all. But if you look at our history of whatever, a few 100,000 years, ऐसे मौके तो बहुत कम आए हैं. So humans are not designed from an evolutionary perspective to really get exponentials. And, there's this really nice story of chess. And, chess ka game, whoever had invented, apparently it was invented in India. And when the person invented this game, the king who had asked him to create this game said, okay, aapko kya chahiye, aap batao. And he said, I want 1 grain of rice on the first square. Please double it 2, then 4, then 8. And if you were a king, what would this sound like to you?
It would be not much, right?
It would be like, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know that is equal to more grains of rice than even today have been produced globally? That's very hard for us to intuitively get. Yes, mathematically, if you do the calculation, you will eventually come to that outcome. But that's not going to be your first response. It'll sound like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kitna ho sakta hai? Ek se to shuru kiya hai, So that's the thing. Exponentials throw us off balance because we don't grasp them intuitively. We only grasp them if we have learned and taught ourselves, and even then it's not intuitive. You just have to actually do the math and
see what it is, because our mind is not designed to kind of calculate in that fashion.
Not at
right?
all.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Right. I read another piece that you wrote about curiosity. So if I remember correctly, you spoke about I-type and D-type curiosity. So can you explain us what is that?
Yeah. So remember I said that your future readiness is impacted by भाई आप दुनिया में interested भी हैं कि नहीं हैं. अगर आप interested नहीं हैं तो आपको कुछ नजर नहीं आने वाला. फिर आप future opportunities तो भूल ही जाइए कैसे होंगी, right? But curiosity has 2 dimensions, and in the test actually we have created, it's one of the most interesting factors. Because of the people who've taken the test so far, some are really high on curiosity I, others are really high on curiosity D. So what are these two curiosities? Curiosity I, just I is for interest. I'm interested in many things. Like, I think you are interested in many things. That's why you have a podcast besides your regular job. And I'm sure you have many other areas of interest,
course,
right? So people who are high in curiosity I are typically people who have a desire to explore the world. अभी ये फील्ड ही नहीं, मुझे ये फील्ड में भी देखना है क्या हो रहा है, फिर मुझे इसमें भी इंटरेस्ट है. I'm curious. And I'm going to use my understanding of the breadth of the worlds which I'm in to then get an understanding, okay, दुनिया ऐसे बदल रही है. You know, so curiosity I में जो लोग high हैं, they are able to understand where the world is changing by the breadth. That breadth is interest driven and they love learning new things. Music के field में ये हो रहा है, wow, that's amazing. Movies के field में ये हो रहा है, wow, that's so interesting. So, you know, they're able to tie these different dots together. Curiosity D is a very different kind of curiosity. It's often learned, which is how do you go deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, let's say you and I are selling, I don't know, light bulbs. I've just made this up on the spot. And we have a quarterly target. And we're doing our performance discussion after the quarter to say what worked, what didn't work. Someone very high in curiosity D will say, okay, यहाँ बढ़ा तो, लेकिन ये क्यों बढ़ा? I'm not convinced हमें समझ में आया. या कम हुआ, ये क्यों कम हुआ? I'm not convinced हमें समझ आया. हम जो सोच रहे हैं ये पूरा explanation नहीं है. And people who can do that will also discover a changing world. क्योंकि उनको पता चले, अच्छा आजकल लोगों को ये वाला bulb नहीं, they want bulbs in which do these 3 color things, you know, or they want bulbs which have this next level of efficiency, or they want bulbs which fit into a different kind of decor. I don't know what it is. But they will discover, because they'll go many levels deep, कि इसमें actually क्या हो रहा है दुनिया में. They will understand from a different perspective. So curiosity I and depth वाली curiosity D, and I वाली interest driven curiosity I. Both can spot opportunities very well, but they will spot it from very different places, very different angles.
Right. I mean, because we've been talking about exponential change, the acceleration of evolution being fast, that also brings in a lot of ambiguity, right? That पता नहीं क्या सही decision क्या है, right? So, how do professionals or general individuals deal with such a thing?
You know, I love ambiguity tolerance because इसकी जो research और history है ना, वो इतनी interesting है. So, the earlier studies would tell you कि by the time you were a teenager, you and I would be different on our comfort with ambiguity. And how are these tests done? You know, how much information do you need before you can guess something? How much information do you need? Someone who has a very high tolerance for ambiguity can stay in the I don't know zone for a long time. And if you stay in the I don't know zone for a long time, you can ask many questions. If ambiguity creates stress in you, you will want to close this as soon as possible. चाहे आपके पास पूरी information हो, चाहे नहीं हो. जो इसका original experiment था, उसमें एक jar में 2 अलग colors के जैसे कुछ डाला हुआ था. I forget, you know, some coin or something, balls probably. And, you know, you can take one out and guess what's the probability kind of thing. People who are uncomfortable with ambiguity because physiologically you could see they're under stress would want to give you an answer with just a few because they want to close it.
Yeah, they don't want to let it unfold.
They don't want to let it unfold.
Yeah.
So this is it's a very interesting factor psychologically. The other piece in this which I found personally very interesting is your upbringing matters a lot. So kids, in the earlier studies, they were on kids. kids who grew up in households where everything was authoritarian, you guess, are they ambiguity tolerant or intolerant?
They're not ambiguity tolerant.
Not
Because they want to just shut it out, right?
Correct. Exactly. So those who grow in families which are fairly authoritarian get very uncomfortable with ambiguity because in their growing up years, ambiguity meant danger. But if I grew up in an environment which was much more liberal, safe, or I experienced it as safe, then I can stay with ambiguity much longer because it did not feel as unsafe. So it was just very interesting. Now, how do we apply this to professionals in the organizational context? Because what हमें समझ आ गया है कि what is creating ambiguity, intolerance is the stress. How do we make it safe for them to experience different worlds? Like जो बहुत पुरानी वाली मैनेजमेंट ट्रेनीज का होता था ना, आप इस कंट्री में ये रोल 3 साल करो, अब फिर जाके उस कंट्री में आप ये अलग सा रोल 3 साल तक करो. It was a great mechanism for people to develop their ambiguity tolerance professionally, because you go to a different country and the rules with which you have operated in India or whatever country will not apply anymore. And you have to essentially relearn the rules of the world. And when you do that more and more times, you develop or can develop a greater comfort with not knowing for longer. And in today's world, not knowing for longer is a strength because it allows you to see how things are unfolding without prematurely arriving at decisions that lock you in.
Right, right. So obviously we can't avoid the situation that brings in ambiguity, right? But we need skills to maneuver through those, right? And we need a little bit more of resilience to go through that phase. But in your experience, have you seen that certain firms have or certain leaders have done this well? And if yes, then how did they do it?
Multiple roles, multiple worlds they've operated in, that gives you great comfort with ambiguity.
Right.
Like a leader who's only been in one kind of organization, in one kind of industry all their life, it's much harder for them unless they have experience in some other way in their personal life.
Right.
The more you've experienced, like in British times, there used to be this saying, travel is the best education, for young men. Men was once traveling at that time. It's true. It's true. It gives you the ability to see this from this world, from that world, from this world.
Yeah.
And that multiplicity allows you to engage with the complexity much better.
Right. And also, as professionals, we have this innate feeling of predictability, right? कि 2 साल में मेरा promotion हो जाएगा, I will start doing this, or I will move through life like this.
Yeah.
But I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, I mean, that doesn't happen. So the future does not unfold in a very predictable way. Now, in your experience, how is that absorbed in an organization? And how do you recommend that it's absorbed?
I think there's no doubt that the ability to work with uncertainties is going to be key. I'm going to separate the personal example just a little bit. The ability to work with uncertainties will also vary across the level of the organization. Because at the most senior level, where you are actually at the heart of deciding what's going to be the new business we are in, what's going to be the new way of doing business, you have access to, and you are ideally working with the full range of possibilities ahead for you. Because change is happening in so many spheres at the same time, right? The ability to deal with uncertainty at senior levels has to be really, really high today. And it doesn't develop, like it's not like आप अभी थे फिर senior हो गए फिर suddenly आप change हो जाओगे, ऐसा तो है नहीं. तो वो तो हमने through their professional journey we have to develop, increasingly what is my capacity to see change. And that's really a process. And it requires us to be able to step out of this is the way things are to continuously asking questions, even as in all our regular meetings, quarterly meetings, daily meetings, weekly meetings. What else might be happening here that we haven't considered or thought of? Because jab tak we are able to pick those weak signals, that's at the heart of it. Our capacity to pick up those weak signals and wade into the fact that whatever we know today will not be enough for tomorrow. ये तो हमें सोच के ही चलना चाहिए कि whatever we know today will not be enough for tomorrow.
Yeah, right. We've discussed about a lot of things now. But one question that I think is very important is change is happening, new trends are coming, new skills are required, or older skills require some refinement. So, what are some of the skills that leaders or professionals will need to thrive in this changing and exponentially changing world?
It's a really big question.
Yeah.
Because as you say, at a skills level, the half-life of a skill, jo kehte the, and I think World Economic Forum had published some data 3-4 years ago where they'd shown that in 5 years, the half-life of a skill had become half or 40% of what it was across 5 years. So we know कि आपने जो आज सीखा है वो हमेशा के लिए तो है नहीं. वो पहले अगर 3 साल के लिए था तो अभी 1 साल के लिए है, or whatever, 1.5 साल के लिए है. So the biggest skill is this learning to learn. And I know we say there's been this whole conversation, learning agility for many years. But what we haven't thought of is what goes behind that. It's not so easy. It's effortful. It's tiring. The reason why human beings thrive on routine and stability is because, like if you're driving the car the very first time versus the 10th time, कितना फर्क है ना? First time तो लगता है गाड़ी कैसे लोग चलाते हैं? Right. How can they simultaneously be looking at this and this and this? How is it even possible? And then, later it's on autopilot, right? We do, as people, as human beings, we are programmed to do everything that reduces our cognitive effort. ताकि हम peacefully अपनी जिंदगी जी पाए. ये हमारी programming है. What can we make automatic so that we don't have to be so fully engaged in figuring it out each time?
Right.
But that's the challenge.
That's the challenge. Thank you, Dr. Shalini. You explained quite a bit about a lot of questions that I put forward. My last question is, what is your mission? You are an OB scientist, but what's your mission for the next few years?
It's actually going deeper and deeper into the psychology of the future. And we are building Future Minds, which is a tool for anyone, but particularly leaders, to understand what is their capacity for change and innovation. What are their natural styles? What are the natural skills? So we're living in a world which is asking us to be very different from anything in the past, without giving us many tools for how to be that person who's, continuously curious, interested, asking the right questions, learning from the world around, changing, growing, innovating, doing things differently. That's a pretty tall ask. So that's the area that I'm focused on personally.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Shalini, for coming to Talking Through, speaking with me. And I hope we will get another opportunity to speak with you on even more complex things without oversimplifying. But thank you. And for our audiences, I hope that you've learned a lot from this. If you have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Lal or tell us in the comments and we will reach out to her. But thank you so much. And
Thank you so much, Dipankar. Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me over.
Same. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.